Well, I don't know where to start. I'd just start off with, I believe that everyone should have their own personal choice to go through with it if they feel like it.
Okay. So with discussions like these, I think it's important to talk about the difference between ethicality and legality, right? Because while I certainly agree that people should have the freedom, and while I'm often persuaded by the philosophical idea of the right to die, I do think that there are certain situations, legally speaking, where the consequences of suicide being legal literally anywhere could have consequences that would be bad for other members of living society. So I'm just wondering, do you see a distinction, or like, are you really taking the position that suicide should be legal everywhere? Or are you simply just saying that it's perfectly ethical to end your life if you so wish to?
Well, it may not be ethical. I'm not 100% sure with my ethics. I'm not the best with that. But I think if they feel they want the choice to, they should be given full will to do whatever they like with what they've been given.
A full right to do with what they've been given. Is that correct? Sorry, I can't.
Sorry, yeah. No. Okay, I'll try and reword it much better. I feel that if people feel, if they want to go through with it, they should have the ability to take what is theirs and do so with it. As it's not it may affect people mentally, but it's not harming or physically injuring anyone else.
Okay, but what about certain situations, like when you say suicide should be legal everywhere? Let's think about, like, what about situations and maybe when a person is not of a reasonable state of mind, right? Like, let's say they're literally in a mental hospital because they have some kind of psychosis, or they've had some kind of this is not a proper mental term, but something akin to what is commonly referred to as a nervous breakdown, right? They're just not considered at the moment to be rational agents. So do you, in your opinion, should they be allowed to hire a doctor to come into the mental hospital and just like yeet them out of existence, or?
No. What I'd say with that is they should have like a 24-hour or a something amount of hours period before they have it, so they can have a chance to turn around and say, no, I don't actually want it in the end. So that would give time for any whatever is happening to fade away or minimize itself, for the person to have somewhat of a clear thinking head.
Okay, but if somebody is in a facility specifically for mental patients, like, and usually this happens to be a certain floor of a hospital or some kind of a living, like a residence home. So I'm not trying to conjure like images of an old fashioned mental institution or something like that. But, you know, like a ward of a hospital, or a place where they basically keep people who are mentally unfit to be out and about at the moment. Do you think anybody currently in that position where they are not basically under legal control of themselves should be able to hire somebody to come in and perform a euthanasia on them?
Yes, but that would be coming with many conditions depending on to them just hiring a random person. They would, what I'd say is we should have a legal system where you can hire a professional person to do it, in which the professional person can reject at any point. And there should also be the time period between them getting it and them requesting it, which would also give the gap, like I said before. Give a bit of time so they can rethink about it. And you've also got to take into account, if they have such a low life and they've been in maybe the hospital for 2 months and they felt low for the whole entire bit, they should be fully accessible to feel that they want to go through with it and be gone with all of the upsetness or the pain they're going through.
So you think that, like, if I'm hearing you correctly, you think that, somebody who is going through either like a manic, a psychotic manic phase of a bipolar episode, or like a schizophrenic person, or somebody experiencing like drug or alcohol-induced psychosis, should be able to make the decision to end their own life after a certain period of time?
Well, they can make their decision whenever they like, but it should be maybe a 24-hour or maybe a whole week until the actual process starts occurring, which that whole week would give their brain or their drug abuse or whatever it is time to either slow down or stop, or whatever's happening to either reduce, or so they've got a better understanding of whether they want to go through with it or not.
Yeah, I don't think that happens in a lot of cases, though. Like, I think sometimes when somebody basically, I've heard it put by somebody, cooks their brain. Like, and I'm not talking about, using a lot of psychedelics or something, though. I mean, it could feasibly happen, but I'm talking about somebody that's used to use exorbitant amounts of like methamphetamines, and their brain is not functioning correctly anymore, right? Like, I'm talking about somebody that has just really gone overboard with like heavy drugs, right? And their brain just does not, like, they have an induced psychosis that is permanent. Stopping the drugs does not make it go away, right?
Yeah.
And there's some people with schizophrenia that, but even when on medication, they will go into states of like psychosis, catatonia, or like have delusions, right? Of where they believe that there are like people or messages present that are like not actually there, right? They believe they're being spoken to through the radio, that they're getting messages from God, basically. And so here, I mean, everybody has the so-called right to, like, if they want to, if they're able to get a hold of an instrument to do it and are determined enough, they can kill themselves at any time, right? Nobody's disputing that. But should they be allowed to hire somebody to come in to the mental institution, right, and assist them in ending their life the same way that a terminal cancer patient might?
Yeah. Well, what is the difference between doing it themselves and hiring someone to do it?
I mean, that is a whole debate, right? That's why I think physician-assisted suicide is legal in many Western countries, but voluntary euthanasia is not, right? Because the idea of the physician actually injecting the patient with the lethal dose is the problematic, is like the thing that's taken issue with in the acts.
I think I misunderstood. So the problem with someone coming in and doing it via a doctor is that they've been injected, whereas doing it themselves is better.
Well, I mean, because you need to grant certain legal protections, right, to the physician. Yeah. And then then like either new laws have to be made or old laws have to be amended or taken away. So I think it's definitely a point of contention that people debate. I mean, like, so as far as differences go, I mean, you would in the kind of world you're talking about, you would almost require that physicians recognize more or less psychotic people. And I don't mean to use that word derogatorily, but I'm talking about clinically people in states of psychosis as rational agents that are able to make the call of ending their own life and then assisting them, like, in doing that. So I think you would, I mean, I don't know if the law, because once you make that sort of thing legal, right, then refusing to help that patient, you can have cases of discrimination, right? Like somebody could literally sue you as a doctor because you didn't help them because they're mentally ill, right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of opening doctors up to like litigation if they don't agree, right? That person's capable of making that decision.
They could always do it like the back in the old time where they had the what's the person when they decapitate people? What's that person called?
An executioner?
Yeah, that one.
You know, so you want to have an executioner?
No, they put a thing over their head so no one knew who it was, even though they all knew who it was. Do a similar thing with the doctor, which if they refuse, the people can't say, oh, well, look at him, he's white, he's not killing a black person, or he's not killing a white person or something, or he's not killing a gay person because they want to go through pain. There's no all of that because it's all done behind a mask.
No, but that's not okay, so sure. I mean, for one thing, I don't think that's how the modern legal system doesn't work anything like the way you're talking. I mean, we would have to completely rework the way that medicine is legally calibrated in order to work that out that way. But for another thing, that's not what I'm talking about here, right? I'm not talking about the doctors having a fear. I mean, that is a legitimate fear, right? Having a fear of being litigated for their actions. I'm talking about them being prosecuted by the patient that wanted to die because the doctor didn't think that that person was in the right state of mind to make an informed decision, and so they refused to help them die, right? Yeah. Because a doctor, they did take the Hippocratic Oath. So even if the Hippocratic Oath goes against the law of the land, they're still probably going to want to honor that, and that will be pretty even though that would be defensible in court, it's definitely going to lead to some pretty messy court cases. I mean, we've already seen it with euthanasia, like without this kind of ridiculous scenario of having it in a mental institute. I mean, but if you're willing to commit to that, then I guess at least I can call you consistent. We can move on. But I definitely disagree with you on that, just to be clear.
What I'd say is have it where if they request for to go through with it, then they would access a euthanization clinic or alike, and then they would sort out a doctor that would be willing. And if there's no doctor that would be willing to do it, the whole clinic will turn around and say, sorry, we can't treat you. So there's no client to doctor relationship in which they can be prosecuted. It's all done via patient and clinic.
No,
which,
but
yeah,
if
there
you
could be more prosecution, but yeah.
no, but see, if you don't, so if you just want to keep that sort of thing as decriminalized, right? Then I could maybe see that happening. But you're talking about making it legal, which would then give the patient, like even if they're literally psychotic, it would give them grounds to sue the physician for refusing to perform a legal operation that did not exclude them, right, in the law, because for discriminating reasons, like discriminating against the patient because of their mental health, right? Because by not specifying that in the law, that you have to be of sound mind, as they currently do with physician-assisted suicide and voluntary euthanasia, by like not making that clear in the law, you would be opening up these medical physicians to litigation, and the patients could win. You know,
Yeah.
I mean,
they'd have to have a good mental state to win, though.
well, no, they would just have to have enough money to hire a really good lawyer.
No, I understand. But trying processing. Sorry. I'm bad for my brain reaction time. Sorry. It may take a minute or so. So, well, I'd say if there was some way of saying the doctors could legally reject it if the person had a mental disorder or a mental incapability that has been known by the hospital or a hospital or their personal record, then the doctor should be legally able to reject them. But if they've got a perfectly sound mind and they want it, they'll not be forced, but they'll have to find a doctor which will be willing, which, if in most cases, you most likely would find one.
Right. But I think that if a patient has been committed, right, to a certain kind of institution, specifically for people that are currently unsound of mind, then it would be pretty risky for a doctor to go there and say, oh yeah, against the clinicians here, I have decided that this person is sound of mind. So that's why I was kind of trying to demarcate those specific types of places as those institutions as, one place where perhaps not all forms of suicide should be legal. I mean, I just think that that would be one place in which there would be nobody, arguably, of sound mind. And in order to claim that, the doctor would have to go against probably at least one board-certified psychiatrist and 2 or 3 board-certified psychologists in order to make that claim.
Yeah. I don't understand doctoring as much as I probably should do to have this debate. But with people that have got bad mental state, yeah, they don't want to, if they do go and request it, and I'm not 100% sure what you're saying with bad mental state. This could be depression, could be anxiety, whatever. Maybe we should probably redefine it a bit better. But if someone has got something like depression, it doesn't stop them from having the ability to have a reasonable thinking. It's because their brain is basically at the depression point. So their brain is depressed.
Yeah. So I posted a link in chat, like somebody that you're talking about, where, I mean, I think this person was maybe a little young. I don't necessarily agree with Belgium when they decided to go ahead and go through, and the Netherlands, like to go ahead and go through with assisting her death, which they actually ended up deciding to do. But I mean, I think that's a little bit more. That's more of a situation where somebody is just simply depressed, right? But they're in a rational state of mind. They're not psychotic, right? They're not having any kind of delusion or psychosis or anything that would make their physicians or their mental health physicians think that they're not of sound mind. So this person had a state sanctioned or country sanctioned assisted suicide. Well, I think it was not even just assisted; it was voluntary euthanasia.
Yeah.
And I'm not 100% sure about how I feel about her particular case, but I do think that this is a case where I think that suicide should be legal, as if it is, under certain conditions when the person is of sound mind and they're literally suffering every day or have some kind of terminal illness, right? Then I think that they should be able to get assisted suicide or have euthanasia done to them. So I'm not going to disagree with you there.
Yeah. Well, what I'd say with people that have got bad mental states, if they really feel that they don't want to carry on, they should have the full access. Well, like I've been saying, they should be able to go through it because they don't want to be going through as much pain as they have been going through. And yeah, they may have a bright light at the end of the tunnel where they get through all of what's happening. But as we know right now, we never know if it's going to end or how to decrease the strength of the depression, the anxiety. Currently, we've got medication which, helps it a bit, but it doesn't help everyone, which there are still people out there with those conditions and they have to go through everyday life, knowing they can't just stop it and that they have to deal with the pain. So what would you say? It's perfectly fine to allow them to go through it if they're like that?
No, like I said, I don't disagree that either. I think in that case, I don't know any prosecutor that would, basically prosecute a dead person for non-violent, not without hurting anyone around them, without creating a spectacle or flying deadly shrapnel into the air or endangering the life of other people. I don't know of any prosecutor that would actually prosecute a dead person for successfully killing themselves when they were suffering daily. Or, I do think that there should be some kind of state-sanctioned way for somebody to peacefully end their life if they're suffering. Maybe even in cases like this. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about that. But I guess kind of the point that I'm not disagreeing with you on that. But the point that I'm getting at is that I don't think suicide should be legal at all times in all places, because I think there are important nuances and legal repercussions to certain policies and laws that can be harmful, like ones that you might not even think about that could be harmful if it were made legal, everywhere at all times. Like just putting the ridiculous example of the I guess I don't think it's ridiculous, but like the fringe case of the mental hospital, let's just take that out, because I don't want to just say gotcha on that one thing and just be like, I'm right. No, but so I think there are some important things to look at when we're talking about legality. For example, the fact that cops are only required to investigate crimes, right? And so if something appears to be a suicide and the cop is working in a precinct where there's a lot of work to do, and they're not required to actually investigate the suicide because it's not a crime, then they're not going to investigate it, and it's potentially a murder. And this will have an especially detrimental effect on low-income areas and people of color, and probably also women who are less likely to actually commit suicide, statistically speaking, but will also less likely to be investigated if there is foul play, if like suicide were to be made legal everywhere.
Oh yeah, I get what you mean. But what if we had a facility where if you wanted to go through with it, you go to that specific place via your own means without any company or whatever, and you go through it there, and that would basically reduce any of the other people being influenced in doing it. So if you were influenced and forced to go there, you could go in and say, hey, people are forcing me outside, can you go deal with them? Or alike. Just like a euthanization clinic, but more deadly.
Wait, could you say that again?
Yeah, so have a facility or a place somewhere where people can just go in and do and pass away in whatever means they feel maybe not messy, most likely would be restricted to injection or quick and painless. But a bit like euthanization, but they can do it via their own means or their own time. And then maybe have someone at the door or someone that says, write a consent form saying that you've done this out of your own will. And if they want to turn around and say, hey, people are outside forcing me to do it, can you deal with them? Then that can be taken further and done with the police.
Right. I mean, I do like that idea in some ways, but I think it would help to avoid situations like this, right, where there's this woman in Massachusetts. Her name is Michelle Carter, and she convinced her boyfriend, who is questioning whether or not he should commit suicide, when he was sitting in his car and it was filling with carbon monoxide, he actually texted her and said something like, oh, you know what, I'm second guessing myself. And then he got out of the truck, and then she texted him and said, you can't think about it, you just have to do it. And she'd been like saying stuff like this for months, I think, in text, just basically dogging him and telling them that he just needed to go through with it. So if we made suicide in this case, right, because suicide was not illegal, there was no way to charge her with manslaughter. And she only got 18 months, even though she basically committed manslaughter. But because in Massachusetts, suicide is not illegal, or there was no crime committed, and so they would be violating her free speech rights if they would basically have been violating her free speech rights if they convicted her with manslaughter. So she kind of got away with it. And that's another instance in which I think that making suicide completely legal is problematic.
Fuck me, I'm joking. Oh, fuck. Sorry about that. Right. Yeah.
So are you familiar at all with how torture is basically illegal, but people do it and get away with it because during times of war, which is basically all of the time, like certain agents that have certain functions within the government have certain powers and certain duties, right? And so they might knowingly and intentionally break the law and torture somebody, just like knowing that that no prosecutor or judge is actually going to successfully convict them, right?
Yeah.
I think that you could say the same with suicide and legality. Like, even if it were illegal, if you committed suicide, I think most prosecutors, or if, like, say you attempted it and failed, unless there's some fringe case where there's a judge like woefully misinterpreting or like abusing some kind of 17th century law from before the time that the states were ratified. Except for those fringe cases, for the most part, nobody's going to prosecute or sentence somebody that attempts suicide, or when they commit suicide, like nobody's going to hold their family or their estate accountable, right? I mean, that could happen, but ideally we would have it so that there's like a I think it's, sorry if I'm not getting the term right, but like de facto law, and it's just basically the way the law is used is differently than it's stated, so that it has the most utility and protection for all people.
Yeah. So I'm not 100% sure where you're trying to like point at with it, but it's basically, you're trying to basically say that law is different and it may allow people of higher power to get through with whatever they want.
Well, yeah, no, it's kind of like what Flaccid just said in chat. Like, prosecutors have better things to do than prosecute dead people. And, you're going to have a hard time finding a judge that would actually agree with the prosecution when it comes to like detaining somebody's assets or holding their family members accountable, or like convicting somebody that failed in their suicide attempt. I mean, I'm not saying it would never happen, but it would be very, very unlikely. It is very, very unlikely. And what I'm arguing is that when suicide is illegal, it ends up protecting more people. Like, for example, victims of crime, or victims of people who do commit public suicides, or suicides in which they harm other people. Then it does actually having it be made legal for everyone at all times.
But doesn't the legal part of it make it very unsafe? And then again, that's really not a problem. Shit. No. With it being non-legal, I get that people... With it being non-legal... Hang on, trying to get my noms right. Not...
Illegal?
Yeah, I've got double negatives stuck in my head here. It's going on a loop.
That's okay. Continue.
Yeah, with suicide being non-legal, it would help people it would stop a majority more of people following the chain reaction in which was first caused because of it, or a initial problem, yeah? But at the same time, if they feel that they can't go through it themselves non-legally, what would change their mind if it was legal?
But
because when I'm not 100% sure if I've got you, but if it's not legal to go and jump off the side of a bridge, to get euthanization or alike, yeah.
Well, no, I'm not arguing for that, because
no, I know, but if it as it most likely currently is for most places, you can't go to a place and get your head chopped off
Right.
I'm not saying it should be a thing, but if it was, the most likely amount of people that would go and do it would be near enough identical to the people that would do it anyway. Yeah. So there's not a lot of difference. There are some people that will go and do it, and they wouldn't do it if it wasn't legal. So many negatives, not. But,
right. What I'm saying is that I don't think that any person that really wants to commit suicide will be hurt by doing it in a non-legal way, because I just don't think that them or their family is going to be prosecuted unless they commit other crimes when they do it. Right. So I just don't think that they would be, like, if a person jumps off a bridge and lands on somebody's boat that's passing under the bridge and then lands on another person and basically permanently disables them for life, then their family has the right to basically sue that person's estate and, like, their living heirs, basically, in order to get damages for their, like, lifelong disfigurement, for their disability, basically, so that they can live. And I think that's what I'm saying, that I think that's a good thing, because I think that when somebody, I think that there should be a legal way to commit suicide that is basically like we were talking about with the 24 and ready to die girl, somebody who's suffering, who's not, who is in the right state of mind, right? Who has exhausted all other possibilities, like, therapy, medication, and everything with their doctor, and their doctors agree, right? There's like a panel of doctors, just like there is in Norway, where they agree that this person can commit suicide. Then I think that that's fine, right? But if somebody's just going to go do it, then I think it should kind of be like torture. They should do it illegally, right? Knowing that whatever they do in the process, like, probably won't be prosecuted or hurt their family, but they need to be considerate in the way that they do it. They need to not emotionally damage the general public or physically damage anybody, for that matter, when doing it, because they do need to be afraid of those repercussions, like their estate, for example.
Oh, yeah. So what would be the difference? I'm not I'm just more confused of, if someone was to legally do it, what would that be any different from, like, if there was something in place where they have to write a thing saying no one can sue because you're going through with it, you fully understood that your family will go through so much trauma, and if they had that thing where at the door you accept that and you have to write your signature to prove that you have done it and you want to go through with it, and it has, you're going to affect your family, you're going to affect the people around you, your country, you're pushing your ideas down into the bin, then I think that'd be perfectly fine, because that's showing that they have understood that what they're doing is going to harm them or harm anyone around them.
Right. So let me try to explain. So when I'm talking about emotional harm done during a public suicide, for example, I'm talking about little kids finding somebody's body at the park, or somebody else's body landing on someone when they jump, right? I'm talking about the general public. Like, yes, it is traumatic for a family member to know, maybe the family and friends of that 24-year-old girl who legally committed, and with the full authority of the country of Belgium, committed suicide through euthanasia. I'm sure their family and friends were a bit traumatized, right? But I'm not talking about that kind of, I don't think there would be no strong legal case for a traumatized family member to basically sue that person's estate or other family members and say that, they are owed something for the trauma. Because I think death and losing somebody is just a normal trauma that everybody faces. the kind of trauma that I'm talking about, like protecting the general public with by keeping just like suicide, just not euthanasia and not assisted physician suicide, but just suicide, right? Like non-physician assisted suicide. What I'm talking about with keeping that illegal is that I think it protects the general public from from like being murdered or coerced into suicide and not having it be investigated, right? Or two, being a victim of somebody else's suicide, either emotionally or physically, when it's public. Like say somebody blows their brains out in front of a bunch of school children, right? Those if that person's really rich, right? Those school children, their parents have the right to like sue that person's estate to get money for those children to get therapy.
Oh yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Like, I think there's benefit to society to keep it illegal so that people can use the law to get damages in the case that the person is irresponsible in the way they commit suicide.
Yeah. Okay, then. I understand it much better. So do you feel that people shouldn't be allowed to do it wherever they want, basically? And if you do it in front of a class, if you're a teacher and you're teaching, you're just fed up, you're like, stuff it. Shoot, bang, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, think about a bus driver, driving a bunch of elementary school kids to school, and they're like, fuck it, and they just shoot themselves in the head. I mean, then they're basically murderers, right? Like, they've caused a huge interstate traffic jam, maybe cause some people to lose their jobs and like a bunch of people to lose their lives. I mean, that's pretty bad, right? Yeah, no, I don't think people should be able to commit suicide like whenever and however they want to. And I think it's pretty questionable even to go, I know somebody actually that did this, to go to a park and kill yourself in the middle of the night so that your parents don't have to find you. Well, what if a bunch of children find you the next morning?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, I mean, I think there's problematic issues having to do with the way in which you commit suicide, which is why I would, even though it's against every libertarian leaning fiber in my body, I just feel like it's better in general with the society we have now to keep it under some kind of illegal status.
Yeah, that's why I brought like the thing of having somewhere to go to dispose of yourself. So not an actual euthanization clinic or a place where a doctor gives it you. You go there and chuck yourself in a furnace or some shit. Or maybe not furnace, but like you do something that quickly stops your heart rate or something, and then you go into a pit. But then that place would be securely locked down, so no kids or anywhere around it, or anyone that doesn't want to be affected by it can't go into it. So people that do want to go to the park and do it will be enforced to have to go to somewhere else. And there will still be people that will maybe do it there, but it will minimise the amount of people that do it there anyway. And that's why if you make it legal, and we have a place like that, it would stop, as you said, people going to the park, people doing it on a bus. It would stop that because people can go somewhere and do it instead.
I mean, I do think there are some ethical considerations for that. Like, I mean, if you have a facility like that, I mean, I do have to wonder, is there any kind of, counselors on site that are available to kind of talk to people before they decide to do that? Is there a waiting period? Things like that. And then, if not, like who's funding this? I mean, are the people that go there, are they just like giving up basically all of their wealth and assets to this like particular place so that it can be funded? Or are like taxpayers funding this? I mean, what would be Would it be a medical institution? Would there, I mean, like what kind of a facility would it be?
Well, whether it's medical or government owned, it still all goes from your tax, doesn't it? I'm not 100% sure on taxes, I'm new. But no matter what it is, it's always a tax-paid thing. So what I'd say is the government would have to pay for it, which is tax, or it would most likely all be your tax. But it wouldn't take a lot to run something like that compared to a huge hospital or something.
Okay, and would, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, would these facilities be everywhere, like in every major city, or what are you imagining here?
A big idea. Let's put one everywhere. No, I'd say they'd have one. I'm not sure with America because I don't live there, but have maybe like one per state, or if the state is small enough. If there's two small states near each other, have one for the both two. I don't know how America works or most of the world, but have sort of like a radius or some shit. It says there's X amount of people in this area. The likelihood of people going through with it is maybe 10 out of 100. Shit, 1 in 100, yeah? So let's say, okay, let's do it in a 10,000 range. Divide that by the expected output and say, okay, yeah, 20 people are most likely to go through with it. Let's put one here in this area, and then don't have one in that area. Which,
all right.
If it's far away, then that brings even more thing of people won't just go there for the fun of it.
Well, would you not agree that there should be a like physicians on site, at least one psychiatrist and one psychologist to evaluate these people to make sure that they're in the right state of mind? Like otherwise they would be committed or something like that?
Yeah. Well, what I'd think is when you go, if it was a door, you go in and they say, okay, accept it, write it all down as a documentation saying that you accept, you are willing to go through it. You can go to a room where they can have a priest talk to you, have a physician, have whatever, try and either analyze you, check if you're mentally capable, and also if they can try and leverage you out there. And I don't mean, hey, don't do it. I mean, hey, maybe one day it might get better, but it's all up to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I agree with you there, which they should have something like a physician or someone there to help you, to maybe stop you or prevent it from that occurring on that day. But if they are fully 100% willing to go through with it, sometimes people can't stop them. But yeah, I get it with the physician to check their mental state.
So I just correct, if I'm being uncharitable, just stop me and correct me. But the sense that I'm getting from this is it's like a fast-tracked version of basically what Norway and Belgium have, where there's like a panel. It's basically sanctioned by the government, and it's carried out, in a government facility with government funding, and it's basically state-assisted suicide.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so I think this is importantly different, right, than what we started off with. Like, even if I conceded to that, I think this is importantly different than what we started off with, that suicide should be legal everywhere. Because I think we're talking about a very specialized thing that would probably be under the umbrella of physician-assisted or voluntary euthanasia. Probably, I think it would be voluntary euthanasia, which is actually less common, like way less common to be legal. But we are talking about a very particular form because there's 3 legal states of suicide as far as I can see it. One is just suicide. One is physician assisted, and one is voluntary euthanasia. And the kind of thing we're talking about, I think, would be voluntary euthanasia or some form of it. And there would be physicians involved, which I think is already under the definition of, under voluntary euthanasia, it does has to be physician, it has to be overseen by an actual practicing physician. So I think that, we're not talking about suicide legally speaking then. We're talking about voluntary euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide. So I don't think what you're saying, even though I think this is a really good idea, don't get me wrong, I do. Like some kind of fast-tracked version of what Norway has. But like, I don't think that means that I'm agreeing with the premise that suicide should be legal everywhere. I still think I disagree with that.
Okay, well, how about we chuck the other 2 away? And my brain's not very good at comprehending and understanding exact words. So could you try and explain to me what you'd say is different between someone going somewhere and doing it with help from a government doctor compared to just the word suicide? Because you say voluntary suicide and suicide is different.
Yeah, and I'll just post this article on suicide legislation. So from what I've been reading, physician-assisted suicide is, it usually happens when you're terminally ill, and it's mostly what is legal, where it is legal in the United States and the UK and like New Zealand. I think, in New Zealand it's also legal. You go to the doctor and they've confirmed that you have some kind of a terminal illness, right? Usually. And then but we're expanding this because you and I are a little bit more libertarian. So we'll expand this and we'll say, even just for people that are suffering, they give them a lethal dose of medication that they can then take home, just like an ass load of morphine, right? Or something like that they can just take home and then take at any time. And then it's enough to kill them. And they're told how to do it too. Like I've heard stories of people that have done this. They're told specifically how much to take and when in order for it to be lethal. And then voluntary euthanasia is when you go into like a hospital or a clinical environment, some kind, or maybe even a doctor's home. I don't know. There's just somewhere like a physician is there, and they're the ones that intravenously give you the lethal dose. After you sign a bunch of papers like saying that that's what you want, and that you're of sound mind, and you're like waiving any kind of liability on the doctor's part, and it's got to be legal, where you do it. I think looking at all of these countries, it's very uncommon for it to be legal, but it is legal in Belgium, which is what we were talking about a little bit ago. It's legal in Luxembourg and the Netherlands. So and I think that I don't find those things objectionable with regards to legality. It's the first one. It's just suicide, right? That I think should remain illegal because of what I was talking about, for all the reasons I gave earlier. Just anybody's doing it for any reason under whatever circumstances they deem to be justified with whatever tools they have at hand. And it's not because I think or I want for that person to be prosecuted, especially if they fail, right? It's just that I want, in the event that they hurt somebody else, either emotionally or physically in the act, I want those people, or if they're being coerced into doing it, I want there to be protections, like legal protections.
Okay. But so if someone was to go out in the street, shoot themselves in the head, how can that be legally protected? Compared to if someone went to somewhere and did it privately by their own accord. Shit, no, that doesn't work.
Well, so if they didn't hurt anybody, right? Yeah. But perhaps there were some witnesses that were traumatized, then if that person had any kind of like, let's say they had a house or car in their name or something, like it would be possible then for the people that saw it, though I think it would be hard. Like if the person just shot themselves on the street, I think it would be difficult to make the case that anybody that witnessed it would have, like, it would be very difficult to make the case that just because you were a witness, you can lay claim to their assets. But it could be argued in court, right? But like, you know, I'm talking about a situation where maybe it was in front of a group of children, or maybe some shrapnel, like, went off and hit somebody in the leg, and they need money now to pay for their medical bills, like this sort of thing. I just think it's important for there to be legal recourse for the victims. And it's really hard to do that if suicide is just completely legal.
Okay, I think I kind of understand what you're saying. So, what I was thinking is if when it's illegal to do it, people will be feeling like, oh, they shouldn't do it because it's illegal, yeah? And then that would stop them. But the people that do it anyway and that would go through with it...
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't be with the intention of stopping people, right? Because I don't think that people that really want to die are really going to be afraid of being legally prosecuted once they're dead, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, I understand what you're trying to say. I'm just trying to put my words in my brain and get them working. But if someone knows that it's illegal, they would hesitate to do it. They won't hesitate to do it anywhere. Like you said, if they want to do it, they'll just go out and do it. So whether it's legal or not, they will just do it. But if we legally say, okay, you can do it, but please do it somewhere that it's not in front of children, it's not here and that, then that can be validly said, well, they're not harming or making anyone else a victim unless it's a family member and some shit.
Yeah, so, and that's what I'm saying. Like de facto, it would be legal. Because even though it's technically illegal to commit suicide, right? If literally nobody was harmed by your suicide and just somebody found you or like saw you do it in your home, there would be no way that they would have legal recourse, or like they wouldn't have any kind of good case to like actually prosecute your family or your estate because you didn't hurt anybody. And they just merely saw you, right?
Yeah.
So de facto, it would kind of be legal as long as you were at home. You know, you did it like with a gun. Nobody was around. Like nobody got hurt. Somebody found you later. Like that would not really be prosecutable, even though it's illegal. So it would kind of be legal just by the fact that it's not really prosecutable. Does that make sense?
Kind of, but so if that is legal to an extent, where would you say that it's not legal? Why? Well, because would you concede in saying that if the government said you can legally do it if you put a specific note on yourself saying that you've done it with your own signature, saying that you've accepted it and you've done it in a specific area where no one else can see?
No, because it's important that it remain illegal in status, because one, you want it to be investigated, right? You want to make sure, you want the police to investigate the crime of the suicide to make sure that it was actually a suicide. Like, one, that's the first important thing. And then two, like, you want it to be illegal so that if there was any harm done to anybody other than the person that killed themselves, then you'd want it to be actionable. You'd want that person to be able to have a case, to actually like get some kind of justice. Like in the case that I linked earlier with the man that was coaxed into suicide by his, basically told to commit suicide by his girlfriend, right? And then he went through with it. And she only got 18 months, even though she basically committed manslaughter.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So, like, we want protections for people like that as well. So, no, it's very important that it says it's illegal. Otherwise, it's not. Otherwise, you end up not being able to make a strong case in a lot of court cases.
But even now, you can't make a strong case. So, like you've said, the person that told the woman that told the man to go through with it, even she didn't get a good case out. Well, she got less time than she should have. Yeah. But
I mean, in my opinion, yeah.
If that was legal, she might get the same time. But if he felt that he wanted to go through with it, he should write in the note or something. Flaccid men mention me. I can't read, so I have no understanding of what she's trying to talk to me about.
Oh, okay. So what happened was this boyfriend and girlfriend had been texting for months, basically. And he had been suicidal off and on the whole time. And she was goading him along, like saying, yeah, you should totally do it. Right. Like for months, just saying, yeah, you should commit suicide. Like, I don't like, I think she even called him like a pussy or something, like for not doing it sooner. And it kept going on and on like that until one night he was like, all right, I'm going to do it. He drives out somewhere in his truck. He puts the pipe from the exhaust into his window, closes everything up other than the pipe, right? And then the car starts filling up with exhaust. And then he texts her and he says, I'm having second thoughts. I don't think I should do this. And then she said, no, you have to commit. You have to stay in there. Okay. And so then he gets back in the car. They have this all over text. This is like evidence, right?
Oh, yeah.
He gets back into the car and he's later found dead.
Yeah. So.
But she could not be convicted with manslaughter because of the law where she is, right? In Massachusetts or whatever, suicide is either legal or like decriminalized, right? And because of that, it would be endangering her free speech, her First Amendment right, to charge her with manslaughter. So she basically got away with it.
Well, that's except more for the crappy government there, or whatever the state uses. If they allow people to hatefully speak upon people, and America's all about free will, but you shouldn't be allowed to say aggression or negative things, which is a whole new topic, so we can skip over it quickly. But I feel that issue is more of a state issue with but we're talking about
we are talking about real life cases, though. I mean, I don't know. I guess I should have researched ones in Great Britain.
Yeah.
But but I'm sure that there people have been coerced into suicide as well.
Oh, yeah,
but
definitely.
like the point is that if it's made like completely legal, right? That the police probably there too, since the laws are fairly similar in many ways, they're not going to investigate it unless there's a crime, right?
Oh yeah. So, what if the government can turn around and say we can allow it to be illegal if they write a note in saying what they've done, why they're doing it, and with maybe a signature or a personal item, or a way for them to identify that they've done it themselves.
Right. Well, I think the investigation would find that the person, you know, they would look at things like that. But first, it has to be illegal in order to find out that it was the person. Like, in order for their investigation to be done, where you look at the writing and make sure that the handwriting and the signature match up. And then basically nobody is going to prosecute from that point. So even though it's still technically illegal, like nobody's going to get charged, nobody's going to get convicted. So there's really no harm in it being illegal. I guess what I'm saying, I'm kind of going after the lesser harm, right, argument, that there's less harm done by making it illegal than there is by making it legal. Even though it really hurts me to say that, because I do feel the same as you, that people should have the right to do what they want to do with their life. And I do agree that like people suffering should be able to kill themselves.
So for an ethical, not ethical, but for if you hang on, let me get this wrapped around and put it into a nice bow for you. My brain isn't the best at explaining shit. If there's a way to validly say that they've done it out of their own accord and no need to go into further investigation about it, would you say that they legally should be able to do it?
Like, so at first they treat it as though it's illegal, but once they find out that it was just that there was nobody hurt. No, I mean, I still think it should be. I still think it should be illegal, and because there's the murder of the self basically going on, and I think that if we make it so that, oh yeah, like once we find out that everything is like that nobody else was hurt and that person definitely intended to kill themselves, and like whatever, then I think we're kind of leaving it up to, I don't know, maybe the criminal investigators to decide whether or not it was like a legitimate killing of the. I think it's just better to just leave it as illegal. I really don't see the harm in it, and I don't see the benefit from saying at that point, like stating, "Oh yeah, it's legal." I mean, I don't see the harm in calling a dead person technically a criminal in that sense, but. I mean, other than, I guess, the insult to... but, like, the person's dead, so I don't know how they could be insulted.
Yeah. What I'm saying that is, if there was a death or something and they find that someone has died, when they first come to it, they won't straight up say it's a suicide. They would normally say, okay, there's been a killing of a sort. So the police would have to investigate it to figure out whether it was a suicide or someone did it. There's no actual way for a person to go straight up to a body and go, no, that they did it themselves completely. So with the thing of them doing the suicide, they'd have to investigate it anyway to figure out if it's personally done out of their own accord, or if there's been a killing of someone.
No, because I can imagine. So, and this goes back to like an overworked precinct in a high crime, low income, poverty stricken area, right? Where there's just a ton of, like, let's say there's like a lot of an inordinate, like, let's say there's like Baltimore or something. There's like an inordinate amount of murders, right? And the precinct is just overloaded. Then I think in that case, it'd be really easy for the police to look at that, to look at whoever's been killed, who is likely to be, way more likely to be a victim of a crime than just the average person, and say, oh, this looks a lot like a suicide, and just be like, all right, well, it was then to just at that point say, all right, it was a suicide, it was legal, case closed. Like, I think that they'd get pretty lazy about the investigation.
Well, that's how the police work. If that's how the police work, then they're just bad cops. But legally, they shouldn't do that. So, yeah, it may or may not happen somewhere. But no matter where you go, there's always going to be a cop that goes against at least one or two rules.
Okay, it looks like we have in the chat an actual incidence of something that was deemed a suicide, still investigated as a suicide investigation, but where the family has been fighting for the police to actually investigate the death for years. So, of Kendrick Johnson.
Have they got any actual, have they got any proof, not proof, but any evidence of, or reasons of why anyone else would do it? Or are they just, are the family just shooting down a blank gap, trying to say that someone else did it so they wouldn't have the bad feeling on themselves? Yeah, good point, Flashid.
It looks to me like the family definitely thinks that it was a possibility that he was murdered, right? So I think a murder investigation, the idea is that a murder investigation would be more rigorous than a suicide. I think the same thing happened with Elliott Smith, like the singer-songwriter Elliott Smith.
I have no idea who that is.
Yeah, so he allegedly committed suicide, but even the coroner didn't rule it a suicide. But for some reason, the police, the LAPD did rule it a suicide, even though like lots of people did not think it would be, just because he was known to be a suicidal person. And he was kind of like mentally unstable. They were just like, oh yeah, case closed, even though the coroner definitely had some suspicions that it was a murder.
Yeah.
So I think kind of what I get what you're saying. It would make sense, but I don't, other than these cases where there could be a victim of a murder and it's not thoroughly or fully investigated because it's just not, like it's either it's not convenient to do so, or it just really seems like a suicide, and so they just don't thoroughly investigate it.
Well, that's more of the actual cops issue than the actual law, though, isn't it? Well, Flashid is kind of saying that the family hired a private investigator or something, but even if they didn't hire it, from what it looked like, they haven't found any evidence to prove that it wasn't.
Had there not been a suicide law, there would be no reason for the evidence to be preserved. Oh, okay. So there was actually a law.
There was a law, but there was no evidence. Is there actually any evidence to say that someone did it? Because, yeah, he's black, he lives in the South. But is there anything that would say that someone actually did it? And they could just be... It could have been a death and the family are just saying, "Oh no, it has to be because he's a different race from the rest of them."
Hold on, I'm reading.
Yeah, from what Placid said, I don't think that. I think the police, or the FBI, or whoever investigated it, have really been corrupted if they thought that was a suicide. Yeah.
Well, let me know when you're back, Trop.
I'm still listening then, don't worry.
Okay. Part of the law is to, like, part of the function of the law is to protect people, not just from other citizens, but also from unfair government, like, procedures, practices, and people like police officers, right? So, part of the reason we have some laws that seem ridiculous is because it protects it, because there's some weird phenomenon where the law ends up hurting more people than it helps because of, like, some loophole or because of some non-functionality of a government agency. So, I think unless the police were, like, perfect and or not corrupt ever, then it just makes more sense to, like, again, it's not really hurting anybody except for maybe some very fringe cases in order to have suicide be illegal. But it is helping people by making sure that they aren't victims, or if there are victims, that they have some kind of access to compensatory measures. Sorry, I can't say that word. Compensatory measures after the fact. So,
but I don't know if I'm going to be relevant or what, but if the police are doing it now, even though there was a law in place, it wouldn't stop them. If it wouldn't stop them now, so making it legal would make no difference because they're corrupt anyway.
No, it would make a difference because it would allow more people, like that woman in Massachusetts, to basically get away with manslaughter, or for evidence, like Flaccid was saying in this other case, to be suppressed or thrown out so that the case could never be reopened and successfully and like justice successfully fought for. And it would also, if there were victims from the suicide, like, bystanders, innocent bystanders that got hurt, it would be much harder for them to actually get any damages in the court of law.
Yeah. Well, if you made it where, as long as you don't inflict any physical damage to anyone else, it's legal, then that doesn't really need to happen, because if they've illegally hurt someone, then that's a case in its own. But I'm saying if they go out and find somewhere that no one's watching and they go and do it themselves, then that avoids anyone being able to say, hey, I overwatched it happening, I need money out of it. Because if they personally found somewhere close and hidden, then they can't really do that.
Sure. And what I'm saying is that in those cases, those people aren't going to suffer any kind of, those people and their families aren't going to suffer any kind of recourse from that action, right? But in these other cases where there are people hurt, it will be that, like, you aren't going to have to prove that they intended to hurt anybody in order for that family to get damages. You aren't going to prove that they were negligent, right? You're not going to have to like necessarily get them on other charges after they're dead. Like it's just going to be easier for people to get the damages that they're owed if they've been a victim of that person.
What? I'm more slow and confused. What damages would there be if someone went out and did it via their own accord?
Like I was saying, like if somebody, you know, well, people commit suicide in all sorts of dumb ways without thinking about it, right? So if somebody jumps off of a building, you know, there's no fire or anything that caused them to do it. They just did it because they didn't want to live anymore. And they fall onto somebody else and kill them, right? Like that person's family, especially if that person were an income earner in that family, deserves some kind of damages.
Yeah.
If you make suicide legal, you're making it that much harder for that family to get those damages because you're going to have to prove that that person committed a different crime other than some kind of other than just proving that they or like you might even have a hard time just opening that case up by having suicide be a crime in the first place.
Yeah. Hang on one second. Right, sorry about that. No, fuck, I'm stupid. I've lost where I was.
I think
yeah, go on, sorry about that.
Yeah, another consequence of this, I think, of it being illegal is that it probably does, even though I don't think it's going to keep people from killing themselves, I do think it's going to keep people, like especially family men who have families, right? Because it's usually middle-aged men that commit suicide, specifically middle-aged white men that commit suicide.
Yeah.
I think it's going to keep them from committing suicide in such a way that it's going to hurt other people, because then their family won't get their assets and their estate and stuff like that. So they're less likely to like careen their car off of the side of the road, right? And they're more likely to purchase a firearm or illegally purchase like a shitload of medication or something to OD on, and then do it privately in their own home. Where they're like less likely to hurt a bunch of other people.
Yeah, but you've got what I'm going to take is, do you know your thing where you said someone went out into a park and proceeded to do it in a park or something, and you said it's not good for a child to see that. If it's illegal, people would be scared for their parents, like you said, to know it, so they would go out and find somewhere else to do it, which could be a park, could be somewhere quite remote, but it would mean that they can't do it somewhere that they can feel happy enough to go, I'm doing this out of my own accord, and people should realise it's legally okay to do it.
Well, I don't think anybody would win that. I don't think anybody would win a case against that guy's parents, right? Like, say somebody sued. Well, somebody's, for one thing, that person that I was referring to did not have any kind of estate, so they would have to sue their parents. There would be no court that would be willing to that would be willing to blame the family members for that person's crime, right? And then take the money from, like, let's assume he had money, right? I think even then they would not take the money from that kid's parents because just because somebody found him in the park and it caused them emotional damage. Like there has to be real serious damage done to somebody before they can win, before they can be awarded any kind of damages. Like I'm talking about more extreme examples. Like if somebody goes out in front of a huge crowd of people and does this like really graphic suicide, and there just happens to be a lot of children there, you know, then some of those families, they might be able to get damages because they actually, you know, their children actually witnessed that person doing it. And there were lots of children there, and that person like was arguably trying to hurt people when they did it by performing their suicide in front of a bunch of people. Like obviously this is going to be based on a case-by-case basis. But I don't think any reasonable jury or judge would retain somebody's assets or estate just because somebody found a body in a park.
But you said that if people are traumatized by it to an extent, if that person in the park has had such a gory death, and then the next day a bunch of families come to the park, maybe simultaneously, and all the kids see it, I'd say that that's quite drastic for a child to see.
Yeah, but that person didn't. But I think in court, it would just be argued that that person did not intend to traumatize anybody. But whereas the other example where somebody goes out seeking a huge audience to perform their suicide in front of, I think you could make a case that person. But you can make a case though. One case is strong and one case is not.
Yeah, but if someone goes to I'm not 100% sure what you mean by park, because what my thing of a park is a small area with a climbing frame and where kids go. I'm not sure if you mean like a whole grassy area. But if someone went there and did it there, they would have to have it somewhere in the back of their head that is where kids play.
I mean, maybe. Perhaps, but I like that. I think that'd be a really hard case to win because they did it, you know, in the middle of the night when there was nobody around. They did not perform it. And even though a consequence was that maybe children found their body, the reason they did that was so that their parents wouldn't find their body. So I think it would be really drastic if a judge actually withheld their estate to give as damages. Although if a judge did that and it was because a child found the body and they really needed therapy from it, I don't know that I would disagree with that decision. I just don't think it would realistically happen.
So if it was more of a case-by-case situation where the people would go, okay, who was traumatized and how were they? And a kid goes, well, I walked into a park and saw a whole dead man with his guts halfway across the park, down the slide, as knives were cutting him or something, yeah? That would be a valid enough case.
I think the hope from the person, and I do think they documented this in a note, was that an early morning jogger would find them, and they were partially concealed. So it's not like they didn't think this out a little bit, right?
No, I understand it. I'm not trying to pressure on what happened to that person, weird words. But if it was to happen vaguely and we never knew the person, and it was a park where a small area with a climbing frame, and someone cut their guts open and spewed all the blood down a slide or something.
Okay, yeah.
That would be traumatic.
Yeah.
But
that seems pretty different.
If the person does what you said happened to said person, where they went to a little closed area, maybe like a park corner, and took a few pills and looked like they were sleeping,
right?
It's more of a case-by-case situation.
Yeah, and I think there's always some discretion. I mean, rarely cases like that are brought before any kind of jury, but there's some discretion left up to the judge, right, on whether or not that person, based on the evidence, intended to cause any harm, or if realistically there was a great amount of harm done because of their actions. And, that would be up to the judge, I think.
Yeah. I think we need to kind of sum this up and figure out where we are. Because for the other two, I'm not 100% sure if I got this right, but you said that it would be okay in allowing what's the word? Have it on a piece of green.
Yeah, so I think that physician-assisted suicide and voluntary euthanasia should be legal.
On the case of what I said before.
Yeah, where there's some kind of terrible suffering or the end of life is imminent, right?
Well, what if someone is going through a traumatic, not a traumatic, but like a depression, and it's been happening for the past 2 years, and they feel no hope of getting out? Would you say that, just let them do as they say and get out of it the quick way? Would you say, okay, we're not allowing you, we're gonna have to make you go through this torment until you get to the better side of it?
I mean, I think I don't really know if it matters what I think about that. Like, I think that's going to be up to kind of the physicians in that country and what they think is permissible. But I do absolutely think that person should not be in any state of psychosis or be having delusions. And, as far as like how long they've been suffering, I think it's what the physicians in that country are comfortable with according to their own culture and like personal medical commitments. But like, I don't particularly disagree with that rather young person, choosing to die and getting medically assisted by the doctors that agreed that it's her, that, she was suffering enough that they assisted her in her suicide. I don't take any particular issue with that as of right now. And for this argument, I'll just say that I find that to be legally and morally permissible.
Okay, so you'd say that the both physician-assisted and voluntary euthanasia would be legal if the person was of a sound mind and not clinically ill of the brain.
Well, I don't want to say that, because if they're very depressed or like let's say they have a schizophrenia or something, but they're in a lucid state, right? And they in their lucid states, they decide that they just don't think their life is going to be worth it. Then I think that they should be able to end it through voluntary euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide. Sure.
So, where would you say the stopping point of saying, okay, no, we're not going to allow you? Would you say that when they start hearing things, seeing things?
Yeah, I think if they're in a state where they're not thinking in a way that we would give them other legal rights, like if they're not fit to stand trial, or like sign documents to buy a house or get a loan, then I don't think that they should be able to decide to end their life legally.
Yeah, I'd say I agree with you, because I'm not 100% sure on where the margin of between mental state and corrupted brain. But with that, I'd say yes, because stuff like prisoners, they can't straight up and go, okay, yeah, I want to jump the gun and get rid of the sentence quicker. But,
yeah, that was actually something I wanted to bring up, but I don't know if I want to go down that road now. But I think it would be interesting to talk about prisoners having the right to kill themselves. But no, I don't really want to open that can of worms at this point. I guess my overall argument that whether or not suicide should be legal depends heavily on what kind of suicide it is and where that person is. So that's why I argued against what you said. The proposition originally was you should be able to kill yourself, or it should be legal to kill yourself anywhere.
Yeah. Okay. Mella said something. If they're suffering, how about solving the pain? Oh, fuck that word. The pain problem instead of letting them kill themselves. Well, Mella, what I'm trying to say is, if people are so down the rabbit hole that they have been through drugs, been through, I can't think of the word for the people that help them mentally.
If they've seen psychiatrists and psychologists, like that girl that in Belgium did, and those people, all agree that their suffering is just not being helped by any kind of form of therapy or drug, they're just still constantly suffering, then they should be able to end their lives, in my opinion.
So you with the basis of legally allowed to make choices, you would say that they should legally be allowed to have a physician-assisted suicide or voluntary euthanasia, yeah?
Yes.
And on the direct suicide part, you'd say make it illegal for the case of it would... No, I'm still confused on this, the actual direct part.
For the case of just suicide that's not physician assisted, and not physician approved, basically, then it would just be illegal, right? But in cases where nobody was harmed and there was an investigation and there was no murder suspected, it just would not be prosecuted.
Yeah. Okay. I'm looking at the the legislation thing you sent me before. So what you've pretty much said would be like the opposite of where your state is. Yeah,
pretty much.
Oh, these governments not asking. Okay. How about the abuse it opens up? What do you mean by the abuse? Are we not better letting of those people suffer instead of? I'm not sure what Mel is trying to get at.
Yeah. Well, we can talk to them after. But do you concede, or are you going to maintain your position and let everybody vote? Because I think we've kind of talked about everything, right?
It's quite... I think my wording, like I think you said, is very crap. I wouldn't concede in saying that it shouldn't be legal. I think everywhere there should be a legal aspect of doing it, whether that's physician, voluntary, or direct. Everywhere in the world should be at least one way of getting around it, which is legally done. Would you concede on that?
But that's not the original proposition, because but I mean, like, obviously I'm not conceding the original proposition, so I'm not conceding. But yeah, I do think that's, I would like to see people be able to kill themselves if they want to in a legal and pain-free way. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that doesn't, but I still don't think that suicide should be, I still think it should be illegal. Like, as far as, non-physician assisted, non-euthanasia.
Okay. So, yeah, my wording has been very crap for the actual main debate. So, I would say I concede the extent of my crappy wording has fucked me over, but I think it still should be at least one legal way of doing it anyway.
All right. So if I understand you correctly, your argument is that it should be, is that as long as it's legal, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be charitable because I don't think your wording is crap, and I do think we've had a very good conversation.
Yeah.
So you're saying, like, basically maybe a charitable way of your proposition, saying you should be able to kill yourself, or wait, it should be legal to kill yourself anywhere, would be that there should be at least one way to legally do it.
Yeah.
Even if that's physician assisted suicide.
Yeah.
Right.
All right. Well, yeah. Kind of come under the same boat of suicide, don't they? Kind of.
Yeah, kind of. I still don't think that should be able to be done literally anywhere. So perhaps if you'd made the proposition in every country, then yeah, I would concede. But I feel like just saying anywhere, no. And then also, I do think that killing yourself you do need to next time, like, distinguish by saying, physician assisted or something. Yeah.
So I think my crappy wording fucked me over. Like, but yeah, definitely next time I'll perfect those wordings and maybe talk to someone talk to whoever has a debate role associated it to perfect my wording. But yeah,
should we just have a vote?
Yeah, I think that'll be the best.
Okay, that sounds good. Do you have any closing statements?
I have never debated, so I have no idea what they are, but you can explain if you'd like.
So basically it's just kind of re-summarizing your arguments. So I'll just show you by closing up for myself. My closing statements are that even though I largely agree that people ought to be able to have access to the means to be able to kill themselves in a virtually painless and humane way, I do not think that anybody should be able to kill themselves anywhere and have it be legal because of legal complications such as the need for investigation, possible coercion, and damages and liabilities for anybody that is hurt in a non-controlled suicide situation. And so those have been my arguments. That is a summary of them. And those are my closing statements. And also, I think that you did really, really well for your first debate. So please don't kick yourself. Stop being mean to yourself. I think you did great. And thank you for having this discussion with me because I thought it was awesome.
Yeah, it's definitely been giving me more of an insight into my wording and how it all is, because I knew about the euthanization and the suicide part, but I never knew that there was a physician assisted. So you've opened me head to a few more small little pieces of information that have assisted. And you debated pretty much perfectly. And sorry for having to have a great patience. I'm not good at getting words out very quickly or fast, but yeah.
Actually, well, don't listen to that person. I didn't have to have a great patience. I had a good time. I really mean that. I had a good time with this conversation. And I thought it was an awesome discussion/debate. And and actually you didn't enrage me or make me feel like it wasn't worth my time. So yeah, actually I'm quite happy with our debate. Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.